Welcome to Peace Talks, the podcast where we explore ideas, stories, and voices that inspire peace in our lives and in the world. My name is Phil Rosnier, and I will be your host for this episode. Today, I am honored to welcome a truly visionary guest, Margaret J. Wheatley. Meg Wheatley is an acclaimed author and thought leader whose work has transformed how we think about leadership, community, and navigating the complexities of our time. Her groundbreaking books, including Leadership and the New Science, Who Do We Choose to Be, and her latest, Restoring Sanity, all offer profound insights into creating meaningful change in turbulent times. In this conversation, we'll explore her wisdom on peace, resilience, and what it means to lead with purpose in an ever-changing world. I'm so excited to have her with us today, so let's welcome Meg to the podcast. So Meg Wheatley, thank you so much for being with us today. We so appreciate it. Meg, since the results of the U.S. election were released, but particularly since January the 20th, there appears to be a palpable sense of angst that runs in many conversations that supposedly normal people are having on Facebook and other communication channels. Any stability in the area of peace in oneself seems to have been, at least for the last while, shattered. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm glad we're starting with the big stuff. I think it's more than angst. I think it's sheer terror. At least that's how I experience it. I mean, I'm very good at chronicling many things going on at once. I'm a systems thinker. And we are now in this tsunami of hatred and revenge and violence to the human spirit. And when we are afraid, when we perceive threat, we only have available to us the primitive brain, which is the amygdala, which the automatic response of the amygdala is aggression. Once it feels threat, we just have to do something, we act out, but we can also act out to ourselves or to our loved one or whatever. But we are not fully functioning humans when we're in fear. So my own experience as being a deep meditator now for 30 plus years and doing 10 years of long retreats every year, 2 months a year with my children, I'm finding it difficult increasingly, or I just have to bring my mind back from the true sense of threat. I mean, this isn't imagined, this is real. And it's getting worse day by day, hour by hour at this point. And so I'm increasing the intensity of the trainings I offer to warriors for the human spirit, with the basic premise being we haven't trained enough to deal with this level of terror. If we're not affected by it, we know somebody who is. Mm-hmm. Right? And yet, this is definitely where I want to go because it's the essence of my work. We need to have stable minds. We need to be first-rate meditators. We need to be able to watch our emotional reactions and then choose differently as soon as we can. That's the basis of awakeness. It's also the real purpose of meditation is to know how our minds work. And so, that being said, we need more practice. We need possibly different meditations. But we have to understand that, and this is the big if in my work, why do we meditate? We meditate so we can be a fully human being with compassion, with imagination, with caring, with possibilities, while everyone around us is just clenched up and primal brain where there is no consciousness. So I want everyone to think about first, why are you meditating? For me, it has to lead to being available to others, to staying, to wanting to serve. That's not why everyone meditates. Okay, we may be seeking relief from these very overwhelming, terrible emotions. Like, I know rage now from the inside out. We all know grief. We all know despair now. But why do I want to tame my mind? Is so that I'm not submerged and I'm not undone by these very strong emotions, but instead I can work with them. And in working with them, the reason is because I want to be there for other people. My response to suffering is a bodhisattva response. I want to be able to stay. So where I am in my work now, having prepared for this with training spiritual warriors now for, it will be 9 years. No, it'll be 10 years this spring. And I come out of Shambhala Buddhist tradition. But even though I felt prophetic about what would happen, what is happening in me, around me, and in the world and in our nation state now is beyond. We never know what something's going to feel like, even if you can describe it coming. So I just want everyone to recognize that we have a choice to make. Do we want to just feel more peaceful and less volatile, less triggered by these horrible things that happen hourly right now? I can tell you I just got triggered again driving home. But do we just want to feel better personally, or do we want to stay and be of service? And that's a choice. And then we all have to increase our meditation no matter what your choice is. I'd love to know how you're seeing it.
You mean from a personal perspective?
Yeah.
I'm a long-time meditator as well. When you ask how this has affected me, I remember when, if we focus on basically on the big thing, being Donald Trump's election, when he was elected first time, well, we can go back even further than that. When George W. Bush was elected for the first time, I was horrified because I was working for Amnesty International and I was against execution. And him as senator, I believe he was the senator of Texas, had a very long kind of history of proceeding with execution. So I was horrified by that. But I mean, when Trump was elected, I was more than horrified. This time around, I've been, what I have done personally, and what I recommend for other meditators out there is I have really ramped up my practice. And one of the main parts of my practice, which I really have been working on, is the loving kindness meditation. And I do that daily. And so when this whole thing happened this time around, the other thing is I tend to be very empathetic. My wife's exactly the same way. So when I hear certain things, and I tend to be very OCD as well. So these things, sometimes they get in my head and they just rotate around. And so I try and stay away from news. I take in only what I need to know.
Yeah, but that's getting trickier and trickier.
I know.
Because things are happening now at truly lightning speed. So I find I have to tell my friends who I know have turned off the news, pay attention today. something just happened.
I know.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today about warriors for the human spirit, because I think so many people are caught in a place where. Well, as I started, there's just this degree of fear and angst as to what the hell is happening to the world.
Right.
It's like, and the bit that I have picked up most recently with regards to Trump is he's targeting the most vulnerable among us. You know, he's shut down financing for organizations. A friend of ours just sent us one from the Center for the Victims of Torture. They've lost their funding totally
Because they're linked as foreign.
just like that.
I know.
And even my wife and I work for an organization in Victoria called the Vancouver Island Counseling Center for Immigrants and Refugees. And even we're having difficulties. We're Canadian, but it seems to be a ripple effect, Meg. And
I just want to change our language. I was thinking of this last night. Everyone's talking about ripple effects.
Okay.
In systems, these are cascades.
Okay.
Which have a lot more power, destructive influence. I mean, whole ecosystems and systems in general, human systems. It's not like, it makes a decision to stop funding for foreign aid. Because he had to rescind the one for U.S. federal dollars.
Right.
And we think, that will ripple out. No, it's like a flood that starts, a cascading of consequences that then changes life for everyone. It's not as gentle as a ripple effect. It's much more like a waterfall.
So it's like a tsunami almost.
That's what I'm calling it, a tsunami of hatred and destruction. Yes. And
well,
yeah.
For my next question, which kind of flows into this, in your 2002 book, Turning to One Another, you emphasize...
Go back that far with me. I'm sorry. I've written 8 books since that book. 8.
Oh, yeah, I know. But it was just like you
can ask your question, but I'm going to move fast forward us.
Yeah, that's fine. No, I mean, you state, I believe we can change the world if we start talking to one another again.
2002.
And so all I was going to say is, given the present state of affairs, do you believe that it is still possible?
Not the least. So I use that book and all of my earlier books. That's why I keep writing books. I published 3 books in the past 18 months.
Okay.
And they're very different, each one.
Right.
It's because these things that seem possible then are no longer possible. I mean, the question now isn't even civility. It's the question of, are people willing to even talk to anyone the minute they get a whiff that they have a different position? And the answer is no. We have stopped being able to even want conversations because fearful people act aggressively. And so these spiral downward instantly. And so we're all, what I'm noticing is, if I get a whiff that a person is still supporting Trump, I'm just out of there. I'm not going to waste my time. And in communities, it has dissolved into purely aggressive, sometimes violent local meetings, rather than what was possible in 2002. Let's get together because we share a common purpose. We share a common value system. See, that's gone. And the other thing that has completely destroyed the potential for meaningful conversation. I'm going to backtrack on that absolutism in a moment. But we do not share common information. And when there's no commonly agreed information, then nothing in life can self-organize, because everything alive self-organizes around information. Now, all other living systems are in a state of continual awareness about shifts in their environment so that their survival is not threatened by a shift, or they either adapt or die. But we're not there at all, and I've written about that extensively. Where we are now is everyone is forming, organizing around misinformation and deliberate fear-based feeds coming to us from leaders and each other. And so there's very little hope. I mean, in one of my most recent books, Restoring Sanity, it's all about practices for coming together based on our desire to serve the human spirit, other humans as fully human beings. And I was quite deliberate in the choice of practices, working with difference. But what Trump is doing right now, and I just have to say this is what triggered me on the way here, was he blames every failure on DEI, on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So without any information, this terrible plane collision at Reagan Airport last night, he's blaming on DEI hires. The LA fires, he blamed the failure of the fire department because the fire captain was LGBTQ. That's his go-to. Like we're in an inferior position as a country with these failing systems because we have hired women and people of color. So that just triggered me on the ride here.
Yeah.
So, and that's continuing with a level of cruelty and intensity that I actually think is going to quickly backfire, but it won't mean that we enter possibility. It just means people will rebel and these systems will fail. So,
Yeah. Meg, my teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, taught about mindfulness as a pathway to compassionate action. How do you personally see mindfulness as a tool for leaders and activists to maintain inner peace?
Yeah.
While engaging with such difficult, emotionally charged work?
Thank you. That's the basic question for all of us, right? And I've learned so much from Thich Nhat Hanh. One of the stories he told that I now tell, and then I'll answer the basic question. He tells of a village in Vietnam that was destroyed during the French War.
Mm-hmm.
And they went back and they rebuilt the village, and it was destroyed again. They went back and they rebuilt the village. And then fortunately the war ended, but it was that constancy of begin again. If we have to do it over, begin again. In fact, I end my, I actually don't remember which book it is now, but I end it with his dream of warriors, where they were about to cross over into the promised land, and the children came and said to them, no, you must go back and do it again. Mm-hmm. And in his dream, I said, look, we are not afraid. We'll start again. That's how I want to be. It's how warriors train to be. Mm-hmm. But your original question about the importance of mindfulness for leaders, for activists, I was preaching that for years, that you can't be in what was then just the current awful environment. You can't be in this environment without spiritual grounding, period. And you can't be a leader if you really holding on to this ego dream of it's all in my control and it's up to me. And then when it fails, of course, I blame people around me or below me. That's why the ego arrogance stands fixed. And, I don't care what your faith basis is. Now I'm trying to locate people. Do you have faith in people? In me, in spirit. Whatever your notion of divinity is, do you have faith in people? And that was the basis of restoring sanity. But you have to know, and you get this through deep spiritual practice, not just meditation. You've come to understand that, as one of my Louisiana friends' father said, the axis of the universe does not run through your spinal column. Okay? And once we learn we're participating in something beyond ourselves, and we also have help from other realms beyond ourselves, it's not up to us. And leaders of any kind who are going to stay and start, do the best they can in these terrible conditions, really what they need is spiritual groundedness and openness to sacred world. And within that, meditation is essential. And I don't really care about inner peace. What I'm searching for is inner clarity.
Okay.
Clear seeing. So I know where I might be helpful, where I might make a difference, where I might just say the right thing in a moment, where I might choose the right work for me in this moment. So I think the motto that I'm working with now, it's a few years old, but it lives more and more in me, is we need to see clearly so we can act wisely. You cannot choose wise action in any situation unless you have taken in much more information and much more awareness of what's needed here. Not what do I want to do here, but what's needed here. And that's a whole process that I teach. But meditation is an absolute necessity.
Okay, so to use the term you just brought up, inner clarity, in your experience,
Inner clarity, that was clarity.
just clarity.
External clarity. Like, I will get a situation and be able to assess it quickly, what's going on, and what do I think would be of most service here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does all this intersect with kind of a sense of personal responsibility, especially in a time when so many are overwhelmed?
I think this is the choice. So one of my books is called Who Do We Choose to Be?
Uh-huh.
Well, that's a choice. Am I going to participate? Am I going to stay? Am I going to be as useful as possible? Or am I just going to turn away, turn off, protect myself, go live somewhere, or just lose myself in distraction? That's a fundamental choice. Are we going to stay engaged or are we withdrawing? So it's not just a question of responsibility. It's a question of one's life's purpose or karma, or however you want to feel that, why am I here now? And I'm offering a course, which I'd love to advertise right now. It starts February 27th. about were we made for these times? And I'll tell you the experience that gave rise. This is a course to examine our gifts. It's very positive, but it's to examine our gifts so that we realize we were given these gifts on purpose for this time. And so I had this experience in September, and I work with Tibetan divine feminine guides, the Dakinis. And I was in a great moment of, I'm just out of here. This is too much. I can't bear it anymore. I put myself right in the center, but I was done. And my guide came to me and just said in a very sharp voice, Meg, why do you think you were given all your gifts, if not for now? And I saw them like when your life flashes before you at death. I saw all my gifts, all my incredible teachers, the presence and place I have now in the world. And then she just gave me the best advice, still reprimanding me. She said, so stop whining. Okay. So I've developed a whole course around that experience that if we can identify the gifts we were given and learn to offer them well with no price tags, with pure generosity.
Right.
And then we'll spend time looking at where can I be of most usefulness. So I'm trying to lead everyone now. This is not warrior training. This is just for anyone who's suffering from, like I was at that moment, like I just can't bear this. It's too much pain and too much suffering. Now is in September. Well, I still thought Kamala was going to win.
Yeah.
So here we are with hour by hour suffering increasing, and not all of us, but I think enough of us really were made for these times. But the way to develop confidence and energy for it is to notice, okay, what are my particular gifts and where do I think they came from? I mean, we all have a cosmological or theological theory about who gave us the call, who gave me these gifts. It's very common among non-denominational, non-churchy people to just say, well, it's the universe. I think, well, the universe has got my back on this one, or the universe this, or the universe that. Well, that's a logical statement. People think about, as I do, about karma in a very serious way, or whatever their sense of divinity is, of God or Jesus, or whatever your faith is. Somewhere in there, there's an origin story for why I am who I am. We don't make ourselves up. So the first exploration in this course, which I'm really fascinated by, is so who gave you your gifts? What's your theology, your cosmology here? Because then you have to really examine, well, is that strong enough basis to just accept the gifts?
Right.
And then we get on to what are your gifts specifically? How do you know what they are? And then how do you offer them and where? So I'm trying to now, extend my reach, I guess, beyond warriorship, which takes real training and devotion. It's not a trivial decision.
Yeah. I wonder, Meg, if you could please, for those in the audience who may not be familiar with your work, if you could maybe talk a bit about Warriors for the Human Spirit. And maybe also, if you could please tell us why you chose to use the word warriors, especially considering its kind of traditional connotations.
Thank you. That's a familiar question. And at this point in time, I'm just saying, get over it. There are spiritual warriors in every tradition. Okay. Some of us love Don Juan books that was all about spiritual warriorship.
Right.
It's a well-used term in the tradition of the Shambhala warriors that Joanna Macy
Right.
brought to our awareness, that it was part of her life's work. She's still with us, but was part of her life's work given to her by her Tibetan teacher. Part of that prophecy says there comes a time when all of life hangs by the frailest of threads. Great barbarian powers have arisen that threaten one another with weapons of mass destruction. Although they seem to be different, they're using the same weapons and they're of the same, values. They're identical, right? And at that time, this is an ancient prophecy. My Tibetan teacher, Namkhai Norvu, defined Shambhala as a real place, a community, a city of people who all attained enlightenment at the same time because they had the teachings. And at that time, and the time is now, no Tibetan teacher is saying it's a ways off. They're saying it's now. The Shambhala warriors come forth with two weapons, compassion and insight. Those are the bases of how we serve in the world. There is no other word except warrior. And even though it has, in most people's minds, because it has the word war in it, we're at war. We're at war for the human spirit and everything alive on this planet now. Question about that. So, warriors train, and historically, they're always only a small group of people who are dedicated to preserving community in the midst of the degradation and despair of their time. It's sort of a quote from Sir John Glubb, who wrote on the pattern of collapse in civilizations through history. So I've only been interested in summoning those who are really willing to train. And we train in developing a stable mind, knowing our mind, knowing our triggers. We expand our perception through exercises and taking in more information. We have a shared view, absolute view, that nothing can be done to stop this, this tsunami of forces that are typical of the last stage of any civilization. And I've written about that in detail, and who do we choose to be. So warriors know what's going on, and we choose to be of service and to stay where, we have people now from about 40 countries, all ages, although the majority have always been older women, which I'm very happy for. And it's true of a lot of spiritual organizations at this point. But I am able to attract leaders and activists because of all my work on leadership.
All right.
But this is practical. This is now, what do you do in order to eliminate, or not? It's not possible to eliminate the suffering, but to take it head on. That your role within wherever you are is to see how much you can diminish the suffering and do good work at the local level, which is the only level now where it's possible to maybe still come together and do things that matter for people. I still know a number of communities that are, but now everyone feels threatened.
Right. It sounds somewhat to me like what Thich Nhat Hanh called engaged compassion.
Absolutely. Like, I've never gotten, it's just not in me. I understand for other people, talking about engaged Buddhism, engaged spirituality is something they have to wrestle with. And for me, I was just born with, well, why tame your mind if not to help other people? So I was born with that. So, but we all have to get there at this point. It's not about us, period. You know,
So you've been training warriors for the human spirit over some time now.
10 years new. Yeah.
Is it? Could you please kind of explain how that has evolved? Is it like a community where you get together on occasion and
It has many forms, and I have just we've done many trainings. At first, we were doing them in person. My dear companion in this was Jerry Granelli, who was a senior student of Joachim Trunkbach, and also one of the world's best jazz musicians, drummers. Died in 21. But we both come from deep roots with Shambhala and the concept of warriorship, which was secularly taught. But we have run, I don't know how many trainings and developed cohorts. And right now, and people stay in their small groups. I mean, I don't even know these are happening. The importance of community is just essential to all of us. And the two things, community and practice, are just what still is living in this. Maybe it's 400 people at this point. It might be a little more because I've done some offshoots of warrior training in Southern Africa and in Australia and in the UK. But the formal program developed people. It was repetitive. And then we stayed together as a community, but also developing our skills and perspectives more. So it's been a learning community, deeply grounded in our chosen role to be warriors for the human spirit. And I'm just starting again with those who've gone through any level of training with me, and we're starting next week again, because I'm calling it strength training now. Like, where do I need more muscles? Where are we meeting the greatest resistance? So I'm upping the pace of it and the depth of it because of where we are now and how hard it is. And anyone can read about this at margaretwheatley.com.
Right.
There's a whole top button on warrior training, and there's a lot there.
You may have covered this already, Meg. Excuse me if you have, but in your latest book, Restoring Sanity, you highlight the importance of recognizing resilience and maintaining faith in the human spirit, particularly in times of collapse and despair, along with the need for community with kindred spirits, the ability to face despair, and the importance of humor. Now, while my experience leads me to totally agree with you, I believe that the very notion of collapse and despair can potentially trigger extreme primal emotions in a significant. And so do you feel that this kind of fear and loathing effect can be effectively ameliorated?
I'm glad you asked the question. First of all, I want to say I'm not interested in resilience. I'm interested in perseverance. Okay. And because perseverance is the ability to deal with your present moment experiences and keep going or know when to stop. Resilience is more like whack-a-mole, like they keep hitting us and we bounce back. I'm not interested in that. I want us to keep going. But what I have found now, I've been the preacher of what's coming since 2012 in a book, So Far From Home. And I've gotten huge pushbacks originally, like, well, you're too depressing. What happened to your cheerfulness? You were so optimistic. And I just say, well, have you noticed what's going on in the world? And that's from 2012 onward. But now I find when I speak the truth about what's happening, it's not fearful. It's introducing people to reality in a very calm, historically based way. This is what happens to massive empires and civilizations. There's nothing strange or new in what we are experiencing here. And that when people hear that from me, and I always have a very gentle, humorous voice, not a humorous voice, but a let's see clearly, folks. And there is some fun humor in this. I'm not looking for that. It's part of my British personality to find humor in all things. So that's been commented on. But facing reality gives us the ability to name our contribution going forward and not get lost in fantasies, not get lost in dream projects that will never bear fruit in the current context. So I'm both introducing people to the current context with a deep historical perspective so that we can be of usefulness now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the theme of warrior training. It's the theme of who do we choose to be. Let's find meaningful work. Let's assume we all want to contribute. That's a stretch, but let's assume we all want to contribute. Well, if you want to contribute, you have to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And what I have found now, it's like a no-brainer, but even in the years when a lot of people just didn't want to hear me or this historical facts perspective, what I'm seeing that there were always people who said, thank God, this is such a relief to know that this is what I've been feeling. So right now, where are we started, Phil? We started with people are feeling angst or a sense of dread. And I named it more as terror because it is terrorizing. And this tsunami that we've been hit with now, not just in this country, which is important to notice. How do you transform your dread into feeling useful?
Mm-hmm.
How does your life? This is where Thich Nhat Hanh's example is the best, right? I mean, what he endured with 2 wars in his beloved country, and the stories from there are, for me, have always been both inspiring and somewhat overwhelming. Like, really, how could you maintain such faith in people? The reason we do continue to do good work is because we care about people and we care beyond ourselves.
Right. Exactly.
That's it.
So, one thing that I always tend to think about in this regard, kind of more on a global scale, is, Meg, do you believe that peace on a global scale will ever be achievable, particularly in the light of the inherent
Stop there. No.
overarching power of the ego mind?
No. It never was possible, and it never will be. It's some like false ideology, particularly of the Western mind, particularly of the American mind. I don't think peace on earth or saving the world were introduced in any other culture. I mean, than ours, especially saving the world. I'm still trying to find where that originated, how long ago. But peace on earth, Buddhist prayers that I've participated in are all ways that all beings may experience happiness. You know this, equanimity, be free of suffering. Well, that's a blanket prayer, and it doesn't exist. But we want that as an aspiration. But at this point, I've been sort of joking with myself. Give peace a chance as a motto from the 60s, 70s. It's like,
You're saying is give peace a chance. Yeah, good old John Lennon.
we are saying is give peace a chance. And I just add a lyric to that. Well, we tried our best, but no chance. No chance. I mean, one of the things that's happening to this world right now, there are more people who are developing higher consciousness, but I don't see that in most of the people around me. So I'm questioning that as a global phenomenon. But what I certainly see quite clearly is the militarization and the nationalization, the self-protection, country by country, and a movement to the right. Just, the amount of weaponry, the renewing of nuclear testing, which is possibly on the horizon. I mean, all those achievements have been lost. Now we're losing here in this country all the achievements on inclusion and diversity and women rising to positions that they well deserve. Just being shut down. We're losing human rights in this country for sure now. So when you look at history, you have to look at cycles and you have to look at trends. You can't take these snapshots of saying, well, the civil rights movement did this, this, this. Well, where is this now? It's nowhere good.
Right.
Nowhere good. So, history has trends and it has cycles. So we don't have to talk about that now, but I do want to offer one practice that you talked about doing loving kindness every day. Yes. But there's the practice of Tonglen, of giving and sending. I've taught it so much now that people are coming to me and saying, this really helps. Very simple practice. The reason that I mentioned rage earlier is when I experience rage now, I bring into my awareness all those people who are out on the streets burning police cars, setting buildings on fire, feeling totally hopeless, choiceless, and just giving expression to their violent rage. I know what violent rage feels like because I deliberately take whatever emotion I'm feeling. This is the practice of Tonglen, giving and receiving. You bring into mind the other people who are also experiencing that emotion at this very moment.
Right.
The phrase that I use that I was taught, just like me, I wonder how many other people at this moment are experiencing rage or loneliness or despair or violence. So we take our personal experience and we look out in the world. This is not a problem. There are so many millions of people suffering from any of these things. So if you take loneliness, which is very common for all of us, and you just start to notice, how many other people are experiencing loneliness right now? Well, it could be the woman I saw on TV. It could be the person I just passed on the street. Or it could be veterans as a group. Or it could be prisoners as a group. And then, so you're using your personal experience to connect to the general human experience.
Right.
So you go from feeling victimized or alone in that emotion to developing compassion.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful practice, a beautiful practice. And it transforms our experiences from feeling, overwhelmed by my emotional state to realizing, oh, this is part of being human. But all the other thing, which relates to loving kindness meditation, is once you tune in to these thousands or millions of people who just like you are suffering, compassion that arises is strengthened by the realization they have no way out.
Yeah.
And I do. I had this practice.
That's right.
And when it was first taught, when Chogyam Trungpa first taught it, first of all, students didn't want to open themselves and be vulnerable to the suffering of the world. I understand that, but it really transforms it. But then they asked, well, does this do any good? And I, for years doing it, would just say, well, I hope this helps.
Yeah.
His reply was, just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. And I had certainly found out I'm not afraid of the world suffering. I mean, I'll look at a photograph of a parent in Gaza, and I just want to send them compassion and love. In consciousness, I'm here. I'm aware of your suffering. Yeah, so it's a very powerful practice.
Yeah. I think we're just about out of time, Meg. We're going to have to end it there on a very positive note.
Yes, that was a good way
Yeah.
to conclude.
So thank you so much again for joining us today, Meg. We really appreciate it.
And I thank you for your questions, but more, I thank you for your open heart.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Hope to see you again.
Thank you.